Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'm talking about Season 2, Episode 5, The Apartment. Hello everyone, I hope everyone's doing great. I'm doing pretty well. I'm just getting into this groove, I guess, of summer with my kids and juggling work and doing this podcast and some other projects that I'm a part of in the community of comedy here in Denver. It's been great, and I've been able to find a balance so far, so it's always a good thing when you can find that. Some updates on my parenting things I was going through. I did get my kids involved in an activity. Both my kids are now involved in what's called Ninja Agility. I think it's one word, Ninja Agility. It's very much based on the American Ninja Warrior type format where it's obstacle courses, jumping over these walls, and then you go on monkey bars, and then you jump on like some bouncing balls. I don't know. It's all different types of obstacle courses, and it looks like a blast. I don't think I would last 5 minutes in it, but my kids are absolutely having the time of their lives in that class. So that's been great. Needing to get them up and active a little bit more. I invested in a couple Fitbits for them, the kids' Fitbits, so that they have some goals every day to stay active, because I definitely see how maybe spending a little too much time playing games in a stationary position is affecting their health and just their general mood and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm doing my best to make sure that they're getting up and active as much as possible. Some days are better than others. I will have to be honest about that. But you know what? I think that's just how parenting goes. Some days are just better than others. An update on the other parenting challenge I was having. I sort of alluded to the fact that we've stumbled upon something that's a little bit challenging for one of my kids. We're making some strides, and I just wanted to comment on how, getting professional help is so important and shouldn't be looked at as something, taboo. Or I came up at a time where going to get therapy or help wasn't really looked at in the best light. And I'm just so proud that the kids my kids' age, that it's not even a second thought. When we were going through kind of the initial stages of what we were experiencing with my kid and suggested, I think you really need to see someone, the reaction was just, okay. It wasn't, no, I don't want people to know that I'm doing that. It's just awesome that we look at mental health, or we're starting to look at mental health as something that's just as important as physical health, and that it's a very real issue that I think, I'm going to go out on a limb and say 100% of people deal with in their lives some kind of mental struggle. This was my first time having my kid in therapy, and I have to say it's been awesome so far, and I just feel so good that we're getting this help for my child early. We're helping my kid get equipped for just more stress and things that they'll have to deal with as they get older, because life isn't without stress and life isn't without anxiety and different types of things that will just put your emotions in precarious situations. And so I'm just so encouraged and really, really proud of not only my own child, but this generation that is coming up around my kid's age, just saying, yeah, if you need help, go to the doctor, just like you would go to the doctor if you had a stomach ache. I'm just so proud of my child too, because my kid just jumped in and said, I will work towards getting better as well. So anyway, just a proud mom over here. And this proud mom is now going to get back to the episode. So yes, the synopsis for The Apartment from my coffee table book is as follows. Jerry gets Elaine an apartment right above his own, but the implications of this make him change his mind. Elaine, Jerry, and George are invited to watch the New York Marathon from a friend's apartment, where George tests a theory that wearing a wedding band will make him more attractive to women. Kramer experiments with moose. I just love that there's one sentence at the end about Kramer. So the first scene is in Jerry's apartment. Kramer is moosed up. He is excited. He thinks this is just going to take his life in a new direction with moosed hair. I think it's sort of adorable. He's just so excited about it. Elaine and Jerry are staring at him, dumbfounded, not quite knowing what to say. Elaine mentions that her friend is having a party for the New York Marathon. She's got an apartment that overlooks the race. Right off the bat, this is a moment where I'm going, well, Elaine would have an opinion about Kramer's moosed hair. Why is she diverting from this kind of funny situation with something that's just not interesting? Like, I know it's set up and we have to get this whole thing set up because they are going to go to that party later. And she even says, I don't mean to interrupt here. So we just, again, have this situation where Elaine could have had a fun moment and given her opinion, because we all know, even this early on, Elaine still had opinions. Give her a few lines of dialogue about this moosed hair. I mean, give me a break. Then we hear two characters named Harold and Manny in the hallway, and they're fighting. Jerry comes out, boys. God. I think they're both supers. I'm not really sure. Whatever. I've already talked more about them than I actually care about them. Ooh. Real big burn, but that's just how I feel about Harold and Manny. So they mentioned that Miss Hudwalker died, the 94-year-old neighbor right above Jerry. Jerry asks, well, can my friend Elaine have the apartment? And they say, yeah, it's only $400 a month. So it's this dream scenario. Back to the whole Harold and Manny thing. I'm just not a fan of these two. It seemed like they wanted to introduce maybe some characters, other folks in the building, maybe be recurring. But, oh man, watching these two argue, I think that was the shtick of these two. And look, that can only be done by masters like the Costanzas. Just watching arguments on the surface isn't fun. But if you're masters of comedy, like a Jerry Stiller, like the woman who plays Estelle Costanza, I can't think of her name, I'm so sorry. But this shtick with Harold and Manny, oh gosh, and it's just nothing I'm interested in right off the bat. And, well, they don't come back, spoiler alert, so thank goodness for that. Jerry re-enters the apartment where Elaine is sitting at the table reading the paper. He's a very smug bug. He's got some news, she can tell right away. And he drags it out and drags it out and drags it out. I did like that for a second. Then I was just kind of like Elaine, but you feel Elaine's desperation to know what the heck he's talking about. So once revealed that he got her an apartment in his building, she's ecstatic. And we can all understand why. This storyline about Elaine yearning to get out of her apartment has been going on since the robbery, since the second episode that Elaine appears in. So the audience knows how desperate she is to get out. And speaking of get out, we see the first get out shove after Jerry says that the rent is only $400 a month. Now, apparently this was something that Julia Louis-Dreyfus did in her real life, and it just became part of what Elaine did. And as we all know, it was one of her signature moves throughout the series. And I always love it. I always love a good get out shove. It's classic Elaine. As soon as Elaine starts she's just on cloud nine. As soon as she starts talking about how much she'll be around, we can go in and out, and I'll be here all the time. Jerry starts to realize he may have just made a huge mistake. So the purpose of the scene is the setup. We have to get all those pieces in play of what this episode is going to be about. And we get pretty quickly what the episode is named after, the apartment. Sometimes it takes a few scenes, but we got it right up at the top here. And my overall take, it's a pretty long opening scene and very smooth expositional content for all the setup. I liked how sort of everything came up organically. I did see moments where Julia Louis-Dreyfus could have been given opportunities to be more interesting. Again, she would for sure have an opinion and a comment on Kramer's hair. So her role in this opening scene was just to react while Kramer, Jerry, Harold, and Manny got all the juicy laughs. The next few scenes don't involve Elaine, but I'll just go over them real quick. We get to Monk's, the exterior of Monk's, after George walks out and Jerry kind of catches him right outside the door. He tells him how he just messed up so bad and got Elaine an apartment in his building. And right away, George realizes what a dumb mistake that was. I love George's hesitation about going back in when Jerry says, hey, just come in and sit with me. And George is so embarrassed because he just left. And this whole like going back into a place you just left, I'd be a little bit embarrassed too. And it reminds me of when you are maybe like walking down the street and you realize you're walking the wrong way and you have to put on this little like mimed skit to turn around. Like you have to maybe like look at your phone or just like kind of stop and pretend you're like tying your shoe. And then, oh yeah, no, I have to go this way. And it's just way more embarrassing than it really needs to be. But I don't know, this moment reminded me of that. So we move on to the Monk's interior. They're talking more about this situation with Elaine. How is he going to get out of it? And then we hear about George's wedding band theory because of his friend Adam from Detroit. I love a little Detroit shout out. Yeah, ever since he's gotten married, women just come on to him because he's wearing this wedding band. So Jerry just is like, that'd be a good experiment. And that Kramer has the wedding band from his father, so he could maybe get that and conduct this experiment. So next we see George at Kramer's door. He's getting the wedding band. And I love how serious Kramer is about what George needs to do to be more attractive. Get a piece, get some plugs, which we know George does attempt later. But I just love the seriousness with which Kramer says this. Like, you're a good looking guy. Why do you want to walk around like that? Oh, okay. And then we have more Harold and Manny arguing in the hallway. Boys. Oh, I hate it so much. I laugh. Okay, so then they tell Jerry Elaine would need to come up with $5,000 for the apartment. And Jerry is pretty excited about that. The next scene, back in Jerry's apartment. And so he tells George this news. They're both yelling with delight. She doesn't have $5,000. Of course she doesn't have $5,000. Okay. Just watching these two guys so excited, exclaiming with so much pleasure about their friend not having money is so gross to me, especially when they both know how miserable she is in her living situation. And let's also remember, they both already screwed her over when they couldn't decide who would get that dream apartment in the robbery episode. Because they couldn't come to a decision, she lost out on a better place for herself. So knowing that and the fact that apparently they're rolling in money somehow, again, I still don't understand how Jerry Seinfeld, a comedian, somehow he can afford to have a car, a pretty big apartment in a nice building, a safe building with $5,000 at least to spare. It seems so weird to me. So then Elaine buzzes and Jerry warns George about how phony he's going to have to be. He's going to do a lot of acting and he's going to be a phony. Maybe Mike in a future episode wasn't wrong, you know? Jerry does have a tendency to get phony. George responds with how his whole life is a sham. That was a great, great line. I really liked that. Oh, I didn't even mention at the top. My bad. I didn't mention that this episode was written by Peter Mehlman. So this is not a Jerry and Larry episode. And I'll get more into how Peter became a writer on the show and a little bit more background on this episode that he wrote. But, I totally missed that. I did not mention that. But it kind of hit me right now because that line of, please, I lie all the time. My whole life is a sham. And he kind of gestures to that wedding band that he's going to wear around for a week. It just felt so Larry David. And so that's why it just clicked in my head saying, oh, wait. He didn't even write this episode. So I will get more into the whole Peter Mehlman writer conversation in a little bit. But let me just mention that since I didn't do that at the top of the show like I usually do. Elaine enters. She's singing Good Morning from Singing in the Rain. I love that song, by the way. And just, oh my gosh, she's on top of the world. The world is just so much sweeter. You're just happy to be alive. And George can't take it. He does end up leaving the room. And then Elaine says she has the checks for the first and last month's security deposit, which leaves her with $75 left in her account. Again, establishing how little money she has and how desperate she is to get out of her apartment. When Jerry tries to tell her about the $5,000, he says there's a little problem. She does mention, oh, I know, the low water pressure in the shower. She's going to switch to baths. I think Peter Mehlman's doing a really good job just building up how much she is willing to put on the line to get out of her living situation. She is so excited. No one wants to take washing your hair in a bath. I grew up in a house that was pretty old. Always some kind of issues somewhere in the house, something breaking, but especially in we had one full bath in this house that we all shared. So for me, low water pressure wouldn't be a deal breaker, especially if I was as desperate as Elaine, but it would certainly be a huge deterrent just because of these memories I have of my own bathroom growing up. The faucet in the bathtub was always on the fritz, which led to this low pressure shower. And as a teenager with thick hair who was, at that age, worried about my hair and my appearance, trying to get a good hair wash in that shower was a huge issue. And that's another great part of Seinfeld, where they hone in on something so relatable. A good shower kind of makes or breaks my day. So a low flow shower would be a big negative. But this does actually contradict the story in a later episode where the building is switching to low flow shower heads. So perhaps after this episode, it got fixed at some point, and then they were switching it to low flow in that other episode. So finally, Jerry is able to break the news. She's going to need to come up with $5,000 if she wants the place. Oh, Elaine is just devastated. Rips up her check when Kramer comes in. And I love Kramer's energy. He's so excited. He calls Elaine his new neighbor. And I love his energy so much. But Elaine's saying, no, I have to come up with $5,000. And Kramer, he's so positive. He's just like, come on, you can come up with that. And then immediately goes over, starts pressuring Jerry. You can afford it. You can lend her the money and she's going to pay you back. I mean, he's basically just steering this entire situation of Jerry loaning this money to Elaine. And it's just, I think it's so good. And it really is rounding out a little bit more of the Kramer character, because up until this point, he was sort of this, you knew he was kind of a weirdo. He was kind of offbeat a little bit. But this scene especially is a really good example of just what Kramer's all about. Elaine, you can tell she's kind of into it, but has a lot of reservations, as any sensible person would, and asks Jerry, well, it would take me a while. Oh, it's fine. And Kramer is the one that's answering for Jerry pretty much. Elaine says she'll think about it and then says, let me just take another quick look at the apartment. Once she's out, Jerry is livid, explains to Kramer how awkward it would be for him and Elaine to live in the building together. Kramer's just really confused. Like, what is the big deal if she lives here? I really love that they gave Kramer this thought process to counter what Jerry and George feel about the whole Elaine moving into the building, because it's the compassionate way to think about it, and one that forces Jerry to admit his reasoning. Now, albeit he does claim that his reasoning is the natural way to feel, as opposed to someone like Kramer, who is not normal, as he says, and that Kramer's pretty much a pod. But to me, it's a really good balance here, that another main character is just like, you're the weird one for thinking it's going to be an issue. Elaine returns and she'll take it. And that's how the scene ends. The purpose of this scene is to show Jerry's range of conflict. At first, that he'll have to act so phony when he tells Elaine about the money, when he's really so relieved. And then his conflict with dealing with Kramer, putting him in that position to lend Elaine that money. So it's a range of conflict. It's a range of phony. My overall take, I do like this scene. JLD at least gets to show some fun range between the enthusiastic entrance to being pissed about the money and then being happy again at the end. It's kind of a little bit of a roller coaster, but I do like that she got that range to play with. I think this scene really does a great job giving some more substance to Kramer, like I was saying. How fond he is of Elaine and how much he wants to help her, well, via Jerry's money, really. And that overall cluelessness where he didn't consider Jerry's thoughts on the matter. So we're getting a little bit more of what Kramer's character is all about. So now we move on to the marathon party scene at Roxanne's. George has his experiment ready to go. He's got the wedding band on, so here we go. Perfect place to try it out. Elaine introduces Jerry over and over as the guy who got her the apartment. I like how this is written and it keeps escalating. Everyone is well aware of how Jerry is Elaine's hero by getting her the apartment. All she has to say, hey, this is Jerry. Oh, you're the one who got her the apartment. And it's furthering that wedge between what's happening and how he really feels. And he just kind of keeps getting deeper and like, oh my gosh, I can't. Now I'm just built up to all of her friends and it's getting that much harder for me to really tell her how I feel. Then we keep seeing George meeting women who basically would be his dream. One works at Madison Square Garden and can get tickets to every sporting event. One woman really has a thing for bald guys with glasses. One can carry on strictly physical relationships with no problem. I like this writing that the one time George pretends to be married, he could have been with one of these three women who, again, are totally out of his league. But I actually do appreciate the diversity. I mean, look, it's no secret that Seinfeld is a very white show. But look, in 1991, to have an episode where George is flirting with an Asian woman and a black woman, I mean, look, I just have to call that out. I appreciate that diversity at a time where I don't think it was even a consideration. Elaine approaches Jerry during the party and asks if he was hitting on Roxanne. It kind of looked that way. And this line has always been a favorite of mine where he says, oh, I'm a guy. It always looks like that. Just a genius line of dialogue because I think that is kind of true. So then Elaine brings up this possibility of how living so close together could cramp their style and could be a little awkward. Jerry chickens out, acts like he's not concerned, so she drops it. Now, I do like that they give Elaine the awareness here because Elaine would worry about that as well, and it's true to her character. I think we also see that she's bringing this up for Jerry's benefit more than her own, because I believe she's definitely the more secure person. Well, definitely more secure than Jerry gives her credit for. So she's certainly bringing this up more to get Jerry's take on it. She's maybe a little bit concerned, but again, she's willing to put up with a little awkwardness with Jerry, a low pressure shower, only having $75 in the bank after the security checks. So it's like she is willing to really put everything out there and deal with some uncomfortable situations because she needs to get out of her living situation. So again, we're just seeing that Elaine is aware that there could be an issue. I like that they at least gave her this moment where she's not just completely clueless, like, hey, this might not be ideal, but let me just check in with you. And Jerry chickens out, even though we all know and have seen that he does not feel like it would be a good thing. After George meets all those wonderful women and Jerry fails to take the out that Elaine gives him, they have yet another idiot competition at the at the appetizer table. And George declares himself Lord of the Idiots until Roxanne cheers, "You're all winners," out the window. That's a really fun ending to that scene. The purpose of this scene, to drive home how thrilled Elaine is about moving. She's told everyone at the party. They all know Jerry is the guy who got her the apartment. We also see Elaine is aware of the possible awkwardness, but clearly she's not as concerned. And my overall take, it's a fun scene. I really do like how it bounces between the ongoing Jerry and Elaine story and then George's little interaction. So those are nice little breaks in the scene. So it was a really, really fun scene. So the next scene is in Jerry's apartment and he's on the phone with George. He is distraught. He's just like, I need to tell Elaine the truth here. I couldn't sleep last night. It's really, really eating at him. But then Kramer, the pod, he enters and he's saved the day. He found someone to pay $10,000 for the apartment. And Jerry knows Elaine will never borrow that much money. So even though Kramer showed his support for Elaine moving in, ultimately, his loyalty is stronger to Jerry. That's fine. I'm always going to be a little bit more sympathetic to Elaine. It's just how I am. I did like the line of self-awareness by Kramer where he says, occasionally I like to help the humans. It was a nice little button to that conversation with Jerry. And then we move along to the last scene of the episode. We're in Jerry's apartment and we hear some loud music from the new neighbors upstairs. Harold and Manny are in the apartment. This is their last appearance on the show. Jerry's complaining about the music. Harold and Manny don't want to confront them either. It stinks up there. And Elaine says, too bad, I'm as quiet as a mouse. You'd never would have heard me. Kramer comes in and dances to the music. Of course, Kramer has no problem with it. He loves it. The music actually, to me, it sounded a little Rush-esque. Not as prog rock, but there was something about it that felt familiar in a Rush sort of way. I have nothing else to say except that. The purpose of this scene, it's the resolution of it all. Jerry is worse off for not having Elaine move in. Is this karma, Kramer? And we never hear these loud musician neighbors again, so it really doesn't go along with the whole Larry David continuity consideration, but oh well. I didn't really want to hear more about it anyway, so I think they made the right call there. Overall, it's fine. It's good to see Jerry suffers after being a horrible friend to Elaine. Poor Elaine, still stuck in her shitty living situation. Ugh. Okay, we're going to take a little break, and I will see you on the other side. You've heard it all. Frankenstein, pencil eraser, Phillips head. I'm Jacinda Cooper, former AM radio personality. Back when I started my career in broadcasting, I was rejected over and over from every television outlet, and all with the same criticism. Jacinda, your head is too flat. So I had no choice but to go into radio. It's not your fault you were born with a flat head, but it is your fault when you don't do something about it. That's why you need the Dome Over, a revolutionary product for those of us afflicted with a cranium so flat it may as well have been designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. With the Dome Over, you'll be fitted with a silicone-based dome that perfectly blends with your hair and skin type. You can visit a Dome Over booth at your local farmer's market, PTA bake sale, or wherever booths are allowed on street corners. The highly trained Dome Over consultant will measure the area of your flat head, match your skin and hair color, and done! Within 6 to 20 weeks, your Dome Over will arrive at your front door. After getting my Dome Over, my confidence has blossomed, and while I still keep getting rejected by television stations, I can at least rule out that my flat head is the reason. Make room in your closet for all those hats that never quite fit. Take it from me, Jacinda Cooper. The Dome Over will change your life. Wearing my Dome Over, I've never felt so level-headed. And we're back. With the extras on the DVD for this episode, the inside look was an interview with Peter Mehlman, the writer of this episode. And as a self-described writing nerd, I really loved what he had to say. So his first premise, he pitched that Elaine was thinking about moving out of Manhattan because she was just sick of it. But when he presented it to Larry, Jerry, and Larry Charles, they kind of took that in and said, but what if we do the complete opposite? I think that would be funnier. Let her move into the building closer to Jerry. That would actually make for a funnier episode. So that's all Peter Mehlman got. He was given that story idea and said, go write it. That was rare, he said. He said, that's unlike any other show, because usually a writer is given each beat of comedy and what they want to hit in the episode, and you just write to sort of connect the dots. And then he mentioned as he was writing the episode, he came up with the idea of George's storyline about the wedding band. And then he turned in the script after he was done, and Larry David was kind of very serious and told him, we're not going to be able to read this for a couple days, so just hang tight. We'll let you know when we let you know. But by the time he got back to his place, he had a message on his, you guessed it, his answering machine from Larry David saying, "We loved the episode. Welcome aboard." Wow, Peter Mehlman, like I said earlier, he was a perfect fit. And unlike that episode in the first season that wasn't written by Larry or Jerry, which was The Robbery by Matt Goldman, this episode felt very much in the Seinfeld universe, felt like the same language, the general attitude. You just felt like this could have easily been written by Larry or Jerry. And that wasn't the case with Matt Goldman in The Robbery. But unfortunately, that still meant that at this point, Elaine wasn't really written with much substance. I think it's a great episode, a really well-written episode, but Elaine really didn't get much to work with here. So even in an episode where she has a major role in the Ace story, she still isn't given a lot of juicy material. In the notes about Nothing, they mention that Peter Mehlman was contacted because he had written some articles for Esquire magazine, the New York Times, and they just loved how strong his writing was. So that's why he was approached to write an episode of Seinfeld and perhaps become part of the writing team. They also mentioned this Julia Louis-Dreyfus quote in regards to Jerry and Elaine getting together permanently. She says, "If they were together, we'd be less dysfunctional, and what's so funny about that?" Agreed. Why put them together? That's always going to make it less interesting, in my opinion. And this wasn't that type of show. Like they say, it's not a relationship show. I also found this interesting. When Elaine enters all enthusiastically, like I talked about, good morning, there was actually more dialogue, but it got cut down. Now, at first, I bristled when I read that, and I said, oh, they're cutting Elaine's dialogue down. I mean, she barely has anything anyway. But after I read what it was supposed to be, I think they made the right call. And I'm sort of paraphrasing here. I didn't really write down word for word. So basically, it's supposed to be, she goes on a little longer about how happy she is. And it's something to the effect of, I woke up this morning in my dingy room, in my gross apartment, with my terrible roommate in my terrible neighborhood. But then I remembered I won't be here for very long and that I'm free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Yikes. Probably not a good idea to quote MLK Jr.'s speech about civil rights in equivalence to moving out of a bad apartment. So I think they definitely made the right call there. I do wonder if that's why they cut it, because they're like, we probably should make this comparison. I would hope so, but however they came to the decision, it was the right decision. Then they had a quote from Jerry Seinfeld about how the Elaine character is the ideal woman. So his quote is, "She's sexy and someone whose every opinion you want to know. I think the ideal relationship involves someone you're always anxious to compare notes with. That's what I look for. Someone whose mental outlook is different from mine, yet I can always see their side." I agree with Jerry Seinfeld here, not only about Elaine's character, but that it's important to have those qualities in a partner. I'm not sure he really found that in his wife. This sounds like I'm totally like gossiping, but I'm basing this off of just some comments he's made in Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee episodes. There was an episode with a comedian named Sebastian Maniscalco. They were talking about their wives, and I can't remember exactly the context of the conversation, but the gist of what Jerry said was that no, he's not honest with his wife. He doesn't really tell her his opinions. He's only truly honest with his friends and comedy peers, but he tells his wife what she wants to hear. And basically how he has like a different wife persona and a different comedy friend persona. And I was like, that's gross. And I'm thinking, if I was his wife and I saw this, I mean, that just would not sit well with me. And he basically admitted, no, I'm a complete phony to my wife to just keep her happy. I never sort of got over that. I was like, wow, I don't know if it was just something maybe he said in the moment and maybe he doesn't really mean it. Sebastian Maniscalco in that episode, he just was kind of staring at him like, really? He sort of couldn't believe what he was hearing either. And Jerry was sort of saying it too, like, well, that's how all men are with their wives, right? You don't really want to tell your wife what you feel because you'll get in trouble. And it's just bizarre. It was a bizarre moment. And I sort of haven't gotten over that when I saw that. I was like, if your wife saw that, I'm sure there was a big fight. Oh, and this was the first appearance from Lauren Bowles. She was a background actor in that party scene, and she is Julia Louis-Dreyfus's half-sister. And we will see her many more times in later episodes as a monk's waitress. She's the one who maybe gave George the finger. And then on the other end, we will not see Harold and Manny anymore. I haven't made it a secret this entire podcast episode, but I'm not sad about that. They were trying to do this thing where, they're always in the hallway and then boys, like I was annoyed the first time that happened. And then the second time I was done with it. So, and kind of to quote that NBC executive, It's a bit hacky. I think ultimately they got what they were looking for with the Newman character. You know, another person in the building who comes in and out sometimes here and there, not every episode. Certainly Wayne Knight was a much better choice than these two actors who, and it's not their fault. They were perfectly fine. Performances were good, but just the characters, Harold and Manny, just did not do it for me. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. I liked her overall performance. I mean, again, it's tough to pick a favorite moment because, all of her material was sort of bland. But I did like the good morning, good morning. Again, JLD does the best she can with the little she's given. And there was that little side sachet thing she does when she goes to check the apartment again. And to me, that was JLD trying to do something fun in a script that was full of dry toast for her. And my final thoughts. So similar to the jacket episode, the A story has a lot to do with Elaine in the sense that she's related to the plot. But most of the meaningful content in regards to that story belongs to the men on the show. So mostly Jerry and George, and in this one, Kramer as well. And I mentioned it last week, Julia Louis-Dreyfus gets zero funny. Nothing comedic to work with here. Everything funny was given to the men. And I can only imagine her frustration behind the scenes about that. Okay, she got more screen time, but not very substantive. And finally, that vibe that Jerry and George had about being so horrified that Elaine would be moving in, just off-putting to me. And it's not that I don't recognize that that would be awkward. I absolutely see where they're coming from. But I would have loved if it was more balanced out with Elaine having some reservations, maybe a scene with Elaine talking about that. Now, I don't know who would she be talking about that to, because we haven't established any kind of friends for Elaine. This is me again internalizing this and imagining it through my own writer's brain. How would I write this today? Or how would I have altered this to make it not so male heavy with very little Elaine contribution? And I guess I just would show Elaine's side of it somehow. Because that moment where George and Jerry celebrate her lack of funds, it really got under my skin. And as a woman, I'd write it from a female perspective as well. That would involve more than a passing mention of it at that party. So to me, I would have liked a little bit more of a balanced, how does she feel about it? How does he feel about it? Let's really get both sides out on the table. But I get it. It's called Seinfeld. We're going to get more of Jerry's feelings. I understand. But this is me doing some revisionist writing. I don't even know if that's the right term, but I think you guys know what I mean. And that's really all I can say. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. I just have to say, this has been a blast. Every week, I look forward to digging into these episodes and sharing my thoughts. This has been such a labor of love and kind of a passion project I've been wanting to do for so long. And thank you. If you are listening and you've listened to a few episodes, you listen to all of the episodes, or if this is your first episode you're listening to, I really, really appreciate every single person who's taken the time to tune in or download or press play on Spotify, whatever it is, whatever the terminology is. I so appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I will see you next time.